Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spellbound, a darker shade of black. Get your copy today at your favorite online bookseller. One of my viewers who picked up my novel Spellbound asked me what the progress was on the sequel to Spellbound, the legendary Mad Matilda. Now, in this video, I'm going to give everybody a bit of a progress report and let them know where the book is and let them know more about this Spinsterella trilogy. Now, the Spinsterella trilogy started back in 2015 when I wanted to write a novel about an African-American goth, Matilda Crowley. And the response to Spinsterella was so positive, and I learned so much about the goth subculture, I wanted to do another book about the character. But this one was one I was going to do for younger readers, which pretty much chronicled how Matilda became a part of the goth subculture and her reasons for becoming a part of the goth subculture. And I did that in the novel Spellbound, which I released on Halloween in 2016. But after I released Spellbound and it got positive responses, I got requests from many readers who wanted to know what happened to the Matilda Crowley character in between Spinsterella, which pretty much chronicles her as a 40-year-old goth, and Spellbound, which chronicles her years as a 16-year-old baby bat who was just entering the scene. And I decided to go back to the keyboard to write a third novel to complete the Spinsterella trilogy, The Legendary Mad Matilda. Now, The Legendary Mad Matilda pretty much details that time in Matilda Crowley's life when she is getting ready to transition out of the club scene into corporate America. And in The Legendary Mad Matilda, we see all the reasons why she went from becoming Mad Matilda into becoming the Spinsterella character that is in Spinsterella. So we get all the reasons why the character pretty much left the club scene and became a part of corporate America. And in that story, I pretty much wanted to deal with what a lot of young people go through when they are coming out of college, because this is something that I experienced myself. Because once you come out of college, you soon find out that you have to adjust to life in the world of work and the world of life outside of academia. And that's a really painful period to deal with because it's a lot of changes going on in your life. And the Matilda Crowley character in the story pretty much has to deal with all those changes that are going on with her in her life, in addition to some tragic events that were mentioned in the Spinsterella novel. So she has to deal with all that, and she has to figure out what she wants to do with her adult life, and she has to figure out what role she wants to continue to play in the goth subculture. Because a lot of people, they think that the goth subculture is just something that people live as an easy lifestyle, but no, like any lifestyle that people are living, there are a lot of struggles that people deal with in their day-to-day. And when you're coming out of school, you have to pretty much decide how goth is going to play a role in your life, what part you're going to play in the subculture, and where you want to be in the subculture. And in The Legendary Mad Matilda, the Matilda Crowley character has to decide what role she wants to play in the subculture, what she wants to be in the subculture, and what direction she wants to go in life in the subculture. And this is something that was a key theme for me in writing the Spinsterella trilogy, because as I saw it, people who come in the goth subculture, it's a lot like growing up. The baby bat phase is where you come and you discover the subculture and you learn about the subculture, and the adult phase is where you have figured out what role you want to play and where you fit into the subculture, whether it be with music or art or literature or teaching and passing the culture down. But the third phase that people, or the middle phase, is like the adolescent phase. This is the phase where people are trying to figure out who they are, where they want to be, and what role they want to play in the subculture. And this is a very tough period for a lot of people because they're trying to figure out what direction they want to go in. And I wanted to compare that to what people go through when they're coming out of college or they're graduating high school and they're getting their first real job or their first real place and just getting themselves started in life and the direction they want to start out in life. And that's a tough period for a lot of people because it's fraught with a lot of changes and fraught with a lot of stresses And I wanted to pretty much chronicle that period in Matilda's life to show how she left the club scene as Mad Matilda and became Spinsterella, and all the things that she had to deal with in trying to make that transition from that period of school to adult life. So that's what the core of the book is. And my progress on the book is going very well. I'm in the middle of the second draft of the book, and the core structures of the plot, all of that is pretty much done. The book is pretty much laid out and on pages, and is uploaded right now to CreateSpace. A draft of it is uploaded to CreateSpace. I have the ISBN. I have the pages laid out, and I even did a couple of rough drafts of the cover design. Now, when it comes down to the cover, I wanted something that pretty much reflected the 1990s goth subculture. I wanted something that reflected one of my favorite directors, Tim Burton, and I wanted to pretty much encapsulate that all in one image. And in this image, I much wanted to show where the Mad Matilda character was, and a key point in the story, which was pretty much referenced in Spinsterella, and pretty much tells a story about the character in this period of time. Now, I used a lot of black and white in this one with a little bit of red because I thought that that would pretty much, it was very Tim Burton-esque, and it pretty much reflected a lot of the visuals that he puts in his films, and it also pretty much told the story that I wanted to tell. Right now, as it relates to the story, I'm just doing a lot of editing and proofreading for spelling and punctuation because the structure of the plot is pretty much finished. And what I want to do now is just look over stuff and make sure that all the references to the 1990s are pretty much accurate. Right now, I'm looking over things in history from the 90s because I just don't want to go from my own memory. I'm talking about things like the O.J. Simpson trial and must-see TV and Rudy Giuliani's quality of life initiative and the gentrification of places like Union Square and 14th Street. This is something, I saw as I was looking for work back in 1995. I saw Union Square go from this very unique place where a lot of alternative people and a lot of comic collectors went to get things at places like thrift stores and vintage stores, and I saw it become more and more commercialized with gentrification. And that was something I touch on in Legendary Mad Matilda, how that neighborhood pretty much changed and how the village pretty much changed from a place where a lot of people, they went to hang out, like goths and comic collectors. We would go and hang out down there, but it was becoming more and more commercialized, and I wanted to touch on that. And I wanted to make sure I got the details right with that. And I also wanted to make sure I got a lot of other historical details right, like making sure that I mentioned certain movies like The Crow and Clueless. I wish I could find a way to fit in 1994's Dracula, but the story is set in 95, so it's a real challenge to try to fit in a lot of stuff that was related to the decade. That was the other challenge that I had with Spellbound, was trying to make sure that it fit a lot of 80s stuff in there, so the book read and felt like it was taking you into the 1980s. And I believe I did that with Spellbound, that I took you into the year of 1989, and I want to take you into the year of 1995 with the legendary Mad Matilda. Now, the other big challenge of writing this story is making sure that the references to the goth subculture are right. And after I read Andy Watson and Josh Howard's Clubbing, I realized how important it was to try to make sure that I make sure that all the information about the goth subculture was accurate. Because after I read that graphic novel and I saw how shallow the story was and how they used pretty much goth as just a, base layer for the character of the Charlotte character, it pretty much made me feel like, they really didn't dig deep into the subculture. They didn't really want to understand the subculture. It was like they put goth on the surface of this character, but they didn't really dig deep. And with Legendary Mad Matilda, I wanted to take you deep into the subculture. I wanted you to understand, what the subculture was about, why people want to live this lifestyle, and why it's important to them, and why it's important overall. I wanted to take you into it, and I wanted you to pretty much learn about the subculture. I didn't want you to just see a person dressed in black. I wanted you to see this person, and I wanted you to see their lifestyle in between the pages of the story. I wanted it to come alive to you. I just didn't want it to be, oh, that's a person dressed in black. I wanted to show you why it's important to them and why you should care about the goth subculture, like I care about the goth subculture. I wanted you to come out of the book learning something about it, similar to the way people learned about black sororities in my novel, The Thetas. But I really want people to come out of Legendary Mad Matilda with a snapshot of what goth was to this Matilda Crowley character and why it was important to her and why it was important to her as her lifestyle. I wanted that to be a major thing for people to come out of the book from. And I dug very deep, doing lots of research on the subculture, just not taking notes for myself, but listening to other goth YouTubers like Amy Necrotique and Toxic Tears and Black Friday and Drac Makins, and listening to their stories about the goth subculture and listening to them talk about their lives in the goth subculture. And I wanted to pretty much make sure that you got a snapshot of goth life in 1995. And I was watching a lot of Angela Benedict videos where she talked about her life in the 90s, and that really made me think about my life in the 90s, and I wanted to really bring that year of 1995 and 1996 to life for readers. I wanted you to be like you're literally taking a trip through time, in between the pages of this story. Now, the other big challenge for me in writing this story was making sure that I got the music right. And I've been listening to a lot of goth music. I've listened to a lot of goth music over the years, but I've been listening to a lot more over the last couple of months now because I really want to make sure that the music is like a character in the story, because the foundation of the goth subculture is the music, and I wanted the music to be like a character in the story, because when I was writing this story, I wanted to make sure that there were certain songs that pretty much fit certain scenes and pretty much gave you a reason to see something in that scene. It's sort of similar to what the Bee Gees were doing with Saturday Night Fever, because when you watch Saturday Night Fever, that movie pretty much, that music pretty much is like a character in that movie. I mean, when you watch Saturday Night Fever, it's the Bee Gees music pretty much frames the story of that movie. It pretty much sets up scenes in the movie. It sets up moods in the movie. And with this book, I would listen to a lot of different goth bands so that I could pretty much set up scenes, set the mood for scenes, set the tone for scenes, and pretty much the music was like a character in the story. I wanted the music to pretty much be like a background character in the story, setting that mood, setting that tone, setting the theme, and literally bringing you into the subculture and letting you see what this music meant to people and why it's so important to people. Because a lot of times when people make things that in art and literature that are out here, they don't think about the music of the subculture and why it's important. When I was reading that book, Clubbing, it pretty much made me realize how important the music was to the subculture and why it needs to be in the story. Because that was one of the things that really disappointed me, was that I read that book and I said to myself, I'm making efforts ever since February when I'm writing this story to make sure that the songs are right in certain scenes and making sure that the music fits certain scenes. And it's like they just put goth in the story like window dressing, but they didn't dig deep into the story. And that's why the story in that Clubbing graphic novel was so bad. But when I was doing it, I wanted to make sure that the music was just like a character in the story, and that it pretty much framed different parts of the story and different scenes in the story. And I also tried to find some dark R&B songs like TLC's Waterfalls and other songs to fit in, because I felt as an African American goth, she wouldn't just be listening to just goth music, but there were other dark songs out there that were pretty much made from R&B and hip hop, and I wanted to try to fit those in. And the big challenge is trying to put all this stuff together and then still stay true to my story in Legendary Mad Matilda. That's the big challenge with this one, is trying to pretty much stay true to my story of this character, heck, finding out what she wants to do in her life, and then trying to make sure all the story elements are there that give it that heart and that soul and that spirit, and make you feel like you're in this year of 1995 and pretty much watching this character find her place in the subculture and find her place in the scene as an adult. And I also make references to talk shows like Jenny Jones, which pretty much featured a lot of goths, and that's another thing that I put in the story. And I wanted to pretty much give you that picture of the 1990s goth subculture in this story, just like I did give people a picture of it in the late 80s with Spellbound. I'm hoping to pretty much get through to the third draft by the end of the summer. I don't know when the book will be released because this cover concept I've pretty much, posted up on my blog, and I'm posting up here right now. I would love to hire a professional artist to pretty much do this cover, and I've been mulling over trying to do a Kickstarter or asking people for donations to Patreon to pay for it because I just don't have enough money to pay for it. And I'm afraid if I release this cover as it is, I'm going to wind up on another lousy book covers list because a lot of people, they say they had problems with my art, and that was one of the reasons why I would go out and try to hire guys like Bill Walco to design covers, and I'd like to see him do this one because people complained about the art on the covers, and I think that they could do a lot better job with the concept. I really want to get this one out for Halloween, but again, it has to do with the money related to the cover, and that's something that I would love to pretty much get out here, but we'll see what happens. I'm hoping to get it out sooner rather than later. I don't want it to wind up delayed too long because I have a lot of books on my catalog. They've been delayed for a long time due to me not having enough money to pay for the covers, and I don't want Legendary Mad Matilda to wind up that way. So I'm going to see what I can do to get this book released. I'm hoping if I can't get it this Halloween, but sooner rather than later. I'm looking at stock photos or whatever I can do, but I'd love to have and see this concept cover that I've pretty much put together, be the front cover of the book, because I think this one would get your attention, and I believe this one tells a story of the goth subculture in the 1990s. If you want to pick up Spinsterella and Spellbound, the other two books in the Spinsterella trilogy, you can do that by clicking the link to the Amazon.com in the description box. And if you want to help me pay for the cover for the Legendary Mad Matilda, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.